Have you ever stopped to think, are we actually smarter than our grandparents? It sounds like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it opens up one of the weirdest and most fascinating puzzles of the last 100 years. Let's dig in.
So, get this. A researcher named Ulrich Neisser did the math. He figured if you grabbed an average person from 1932 and gave them a modern IQ test, they'd score about an 80. That's a full 20 points below today's average. And even crazier, by our standards, nearly a quarter of them would be considered intellectually deficient. Wow.
So here's the mystery we're trying to crack. What on earth happened? This isn't about one or two smart people. It's about a massive leap in test scores across entire populations. Did our actual brains change, or is there something else going on here?
Well, this strange phenomenon wasn't just a random blip on the radar. Oh no, it was a long, steady trend. And it has a name. The Flynn Effect. It's named after the researcher James Flynn, who really brought this whole thing to light.
So what exactly is it? To put it simply, the Flynn effect is this massive, decades-long rise in IQ test scores pretty much all over the world. Basically, every time they had to recenter the tests, they found the new generation would just blow the old test out of the water. And not by a little, but by a lot.
And the scale of this is just staggering. In the United States, for example, the average gain was about 3 IQ points every single decade. You let that compound over a whole century, and you're looking at a huge, huge increase.
And you can see here, this wasn't just about people getting better at, say, math problems. Nope, the gains were seen across all sorts of different mental abilities. The trend lines for all of them just point in one direction, straight up. It was a massive global thing.
Okay, so if we're all scoring higher, the big question is, why? Scientists have come up with a bunch of different theories, and you can kind of think of them as suspects in a big detective case.
So our first and most obvious suspect is education. I mean, it makes sense, right? We spend way more years in school than our great-grandparents did, and you'd hope the quality of teaching has gotten better too. Seems like an open and shut case.
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. On the one hand, yeah, the evidence is pretty strong that an extra year of school can give your IQ a little boost. But here's the big problem with this theory. Even when you compare people with the exact same number of years in school, the younger generation still shows those huge IQ gains. So schooling is definitely part of the story, but it's not the whole story.
All right, let's move on to suspect number 2, nutrition. You know, better food, healthier lives. It seems logical that better-fed brains would just work better.
And for a while, the evidence looked pretty good. As nutrition got better through the 20th century, people literally got taller, and brain size even increased a bit. But then researchers stumbled upon this incredible and kind of tragic piece of evidence. During the brutal Dutch famine of 1944, a whole generation suffered from severe malnutrition. You'd expect their IQ scores to take a nosedive, right? Wrong. When they took IQ tests as young adults, their scores showed no dip at all. It was a huge blow to the idea that nutrition was the main driver.
So that brings us to our third and maybe most convincing suspect, the world around us. The idea that our entire environment has basically become one giant brain training machine.
Just think about all the changes. Work became less physical and more mental. We had to learn how to use all this new technology. We were surrounded by complex visual stuff like movies and video games. Even things like smaller families, meaning more attention from parents, or removing neurotoxins like lead from gasoline could have played a role. It's not one single cause, but this whole cocktail of environmental boosts.
So if it's our environment, does that mean we're just fundamentally more intelligent? Well, James Flynn himself had a brilliant answer to this, and it really gets to the heart of what's going on.
It all comes down to a simple question like this one. Ask someone, what do a dog and a rabbit have in common? Their answer can reveal everything.
Look at the difference here. A person in 1900 would probably give you a concrete, real-world answer. But today, we almost automatically jump to an abstract, scientific category. We classify them. We're thinking in terms of systems and rules, not just practical uses.
And that's the big takeaway. The Flynn effect isn't really about raw brain power. It's about a massive shift in how we think. Our modern world has trained us to put on scientific spectacles, to see the world through a lens of abstract categories and what-if scenarios. And those are exactly the skills that modern IQ tests reward.
But just when we thought we had the mystery solved, the story took another wild twist. That unstoppable century-long rise in IQ scores, well, it stopped.
For example, take a look at this data from Norway. For decades, it was the same story. The line went up and up. But then, right around the mid-1990s, it just flattened out. And then, it actually started to go down. And this isn't just happening in Norway. We're seeing this pattern in several developed countries now.
This is the reverse Flynn effect. That huge brain boost we saw for 100 years seems to have hit its peak, and in some places, it's actually rolling backward. A whole new mystery has just started.
So, what's going on now? The lineup of suspects is completely different this time. Researchers are looking at everything. Have our education systems changed? Are we de-emphasizing abstract thinking? Could it be the cognitive effects of being glued to social media? Some are even looking at things like air pollution. Right now, the investigation is wide open.
And this leaves us with a really fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling final thought. The Flynn effect proved that our environment profoundly shapes how our minds work. So if the 20th century taught our brains to think abstractly, we have to ask, what cognitive skills is our modern, hyper-connected, information-drenched world training in us right now? And what skills might we be losing in the process?